Welcome to Crime Story with Camila. Today, we are diving into one of the most chilling cases in recent history, the Idaho Murders. This tragic case shook the small town of Moscow, Idaho, and captivated the nation with its brutality, mystery, and the shocking arrest that followed. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thought on this mystery. On November 13, 2022, University of Idaho students were found brutally murdered in their off-campus home. What followed was a 6-week-long manhunt that led authorities to an unexpected suspect, Bryan Kohberger, a criminology PhD student. But the case is far from over. In this video, we'll break down the details of that horrifying night, the latest court developments, and new shocking updates that could change everything. From legal battles to new forensic revelations, stay tuned as we uncover the latest twists in the Idaho Murders. Let's begin. It was the early morning hours of November 13, 2022, when an unimaginable horror unfolded in a quiet neighborhood just off the University of Idaho campus in Moscow. Inside a 3-story rental home on King Road for young students, Madison Mogen, 21, Kaylee Goncalves, 21, Xana Kernadle, 20, and Ethan Chapin, 20, were brutally stabbed to death in their sleep. The house was known for being a social hub, often filled with students coming and going. But that night, something sinister happened. Investigators later determined that between 4 o'clock and 4:25 a.m., an intruder entered the home and carried out a killing spree that left the victims with fatal wounds. What made this case even more puzzling was that 2 surviving roommates, who were in the house at the time, were left unharmed. One of them, identified in court as DM, later revealed she had woken up and seen a masked man dressed in black walking past her in the hallway before he exited through the back sliding door. She locked herself in her room in fear, not realizing the nightmare that had just unfolded. The crime scene was described as gruesome, with no signs of forced entry and an overwhelming amount of forensic evidence. But despite the brutality, the killer managed to slip away, sparking a 6-week-long manhunt that left the community terrified and desperate for answers. As investigators pieced together the timeline, surveillance footage from nearby properties captured a white Hyundai Elantra circling the area around the time of the murders. This seemingly small clue would become a turning point in the investigation, leading police to their suspect, someone no one expected. In the weeks following the murders, panic spread throughout the small college town of Moscow, Idaho. With no immediate suspects and little information released to the public, speculation ran wild. Who could have committed such a brutal crime?
And why?
Investigators meticulously combed through surveillance footage, phone records, and forensic evidence. One crucial breakthrough came when authorities identified a white Hyundai Elantra seen repeatedly in the area around the time of the murders. The vehicle became a key piece of evidence, leading law enforcement to Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old criminology PhD student at Washington State University, just across the state border. Authorities discovered that Kohberger's cell phone had been near the victim's house at least 12 times before the murders, suggesting he had been stalking the location. Even more damning, a knife sheath was found at the crime scene, left behind on the bed where Madison Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves were killed. DNA recovered from the sheath's snap button was linked to Kohberger through genetic genealogy, a groundbreaking investigative tool. On December 30th, 2022, in a dramatic early morning raid, a SWAT team arrested Kohberger at his parents' home in Pennsylvania. He was taken into custody without incident and later extradited to Idaho, where he was formally charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. When the arrest was made public, the news sent shockwaves across the country. Kohberger, an intelligent criminology student who studied criminal behavior, fit the profile of a meticulous planner. Yet, despite his academic knowledge of crime, authorities claim he left behind critical evidence that ultimately led to his capture. After his arrest, the focus shifted from solving the crime to preparing for a high-profile trial, one that has since been filled with delays, legal battles, and shocking new developments. After Bryan Kohberger's arrest, the case moved into the court system, but the road to trial has been anything but smooth. Initially, prosecutors announced their intent to seek the death penalty, citing the brutality of the murders and Kohberger's alleged premeditation. However, Kohberger has maintained his innocence, pleading not guilty to all charges. His trial was originally scheduled for October 2023, but a series of legal challenges and defense motions have significantly delayed proceedings. In August 2023, Kohberger waived his right to a speedy trial, giving his defense more time to prepare. His attorneys have since filed numerous motions, arguing that key pieces of evidence, such as DNA from the knife sheath and cell phone records, should be thrown out. One of the most contentious legal battles has been over the use of investigative genetic genealogy, IgG, a technique that played a major role in identifying Kohberger as a suspect. The defense has argued that law enforcement improperly used IgG without a proper warrant, potentially violating Kohberger's rights. A judge is still reviewing the matter, and the outcome could have a major impact on the case. Another major delay came when Kohberger's defense team requested a change of venue, citing concerns that the intense media coverage made it impossible to find an impartial jury in Loudoun County. In response, the Idaho Supreme Court approved the request, moving the trial to Boise, Idaho, more than 300 miles away. Kohberger has since been transferred to the Ada County Jail, where he is being held without bail. With these legal battles ongoing, the trial has been rescheduled for August 11, 2025, with jury selection set to begin on July 30, 2025. The trial is expected to last until November, including a possible penalty phase if Kohberger is convicted and the death penalty remains on the table. These delays have caused frustration among the victims' families who are desperate for justice. Karen Laramie, the mother of Madison Mogen, recently spoke out, saying, "It feels like we are stuck in limbo, waiting for something that keeps getting pushed further and further away. We just want justice for our children." As the trial date approaches, all eyes remain on the courtroom, where new developments could still reshape the case before it even reaches a jury. As the case against Bryan Kohberger gained national attention, concerns about a fair and impartial trial became a major issue. The small town of Moscow, Idaho, with a population of just over 25,000 people, was deeply affected by the brutal murders of the four University of Idaho students. The case dominated local and national media, sparking widespread public outrage and speculation. Given the extensive media coverage and the emotional toll on the community, Kohberger's defense team argued that finding an unbiased jury in Loudoun County would be nearly impossible. In response, Kohberger's attorneys filed a motion for a change of venue, requesting that the trial be moved to a different county with a larger, more diverse jury pool. They argued that pretrial publicity had tainted the potential jury pool and that most residents in Moscow had already formed an opinion about the case. After months of legal debate, the Idaho Supreme Court approved the request, moving the trial to Boise, Idaho, over 300 miles away. Boise, the state's capital and largest city, has a much bigger population, which increases the likelihood of finding jurors who have not been overly influenced by media coverage. The decision was met with mixed reactions. The victims' families, while understanding the legal process, expressed frustration, as the move means they will now have to travel to Boise for court proceedings, adding emotional and financial strain. Meanwhile, the prosecution assured the public that despite the change in location, their case against Kohberger remains strong. Kohberger has since been transferred to the Ada County Jail, where he is being held without bail as he awaits trial. Jury selection is scheduled to begin on July 30, 2025, with the trial officially starting on August 11, 2025. One of the most critical pieces of evidence tying Kohberger to the crime scene is the knife sheath found next to the victims. A small amount of touch DNA was recovered from the sheath's snap button, which investigators say matches Kohberger's genetic profile. However, the defense has questioned the reliability of this evidence, arguing that the amount of DNA was minimal, raising concerns about potential contamination. The DNA was linked through investigative genetic genealogy, IgG, a controversial method that relies on public genealogy databases, which the defense argues may have been used improperly. There is no clear evidence that Kohberger ever possessed the knife itself, only that his DNA was found on the sheath. The defense has filed motions demanding more transparency on how investigators used IgG to track him down, suggesting that law enforcement might have violated his constitutional rights in the process. Another key piece of evidence is Kohberger's cell phone records, which prosecutors claim place him near the victim's house at least 12 times before the murders, indicating possible stalking. On the night of the crime, his phone was turned off for several hours, a move prosecutors argue was an attempt to conceal his movements. However, Kohberger's defense team has tried to dismiss this as circumstantial evidence, stating, "There is no direct proof that Kohberger was inside the house. The location data is not precise enough to confirm he was near the victim's home rather than simply driving in the area." Turning off a phone is not inherently suspicious, and there could be alternative explanations for why his device was offed. In a surprise move, Kohberger's lawyers initially suggested that he had an alibi, claiming he was out driving alone on the night of the murders. However, they provided no solid proof, and this strategy has remained vague. Legal experts believe this weak alibi could be risky, as it fails to directly refute the prosecution's timeline. 2 weeks before his arrest, Kohberger was stopped twice by Indiana State Police while driving with his father back to Pennsylvania for winter break. Some legal analysts believe these stops were orchestrated by the FBI to obtain footage of Kohberger's hands and body language for forensic analysis. The defense has raised concerns about whether these stops were legally justified or part of an improper surveillance operation. With prosecutors seeking the death penalty, Kohberger's defense team has filed multiple motions to challenge Idaho's lethal injection protocols, arguing that the state lacks the necessary drugs and has a history of botched executions. While this is a standard move in capital cases, it highlights the defense's goal of keeping Kohberger off death row. The defense's multiple motions have significantly delayed the trial, leading to frustration among the victims' families. While some legal battles, such as those over DNA testing and cell phone data, are still being fought, the prosecution remains confident that the evidence against Kohberger is overwhelming. Since prosecutors are seeking the death penalty for Bryan Kohberger, the method of execution in Idaho has become a significant legal and ethical discussion. Idaho's primary method of execution is lethal injection. However, in recent years, states across the U.S. have struggled to obtain the necessary drugs due to pharmaceutical companies refusing to supply them for executions. This has led to delays and legal battles over whether Idaho can effectively carry out an execution if Kohberger is sentenced to death. Drug shortages, making it difficult for the state to obtain a reliable supply. Concerns about botched executions, with cases in other states where inmates have suffered prolonged, painful deaths. Legal challenges, with defense attorneys often arguing that lethal injection violates the Eighth Amendment's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. In 2023, Idaho reinstated the firing squad as an alternative execution method. The law allows for firing squad executions if lethal injection drugs are unavailable. Idaho is one of only a few states in the U.S. to have this option, alongside South Carolina, Utah, Oklahoma, and Mississippi. The firing squad consists of a team of trained law enforcement officers who aim at the inmate's heart. It is considered a more reliable execution method compared to lethal injection, as it does not rely on pharmaceuticals. However, it remains highly controversial, with critics arguing it is barbaric and outdated. If Bryan Kohberger is convicted and sentenced to death, his legal team will likely challenge Idaho's execution methods as part of a prolonged appeals process. They may argue that lethal injection is unconstitutional due to the risk of botched executions. If a firing squad is chosen, they could claim it is inhumane and violates international human rights standards. Appeals in death penalty cases can take years or even decades, meaning Kohberger's potential execution might not happen for a very long time, if ever. The Idaho Murders case has shaken the small town of Moscow, Idaho, leaving a lasting impact on the victims' families, the university community, and the nation. What started as a horrifying crime has now turned into a highly publicized legal battle, with Bryan Kohberger at the center of it all. As the trial progresses, key questions remain. Will the prosecution's DNA and circumstantial evidence be enough to secure a conviction? How will the defense's challenges to investigative methods and forensic techniques impact the trial? If convicted, will Kohberger face life in prison or the death penalty? And how will Idaho's execution laws affect his fate? For the families of the victims, justice cannot come soon enough. They have endured delays, legal maneuvers, and intense media scrutiny, all while grieving their devastating loss. The University of Idaho and the wider community continue to seek healing and closure, hoping that the legal system will provide the answers and accountability they deserve. No matter the outcome, the memory of Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernadle, and Ethan Chapin will live on, not just as victims of a tragic crime, but as young lives that were taken too soon. Their families, friends, and loved ones remain committed to honoring their legacy, ensuring they are remembered for who they were, rather than just how they died.
Thanks for watching. For more interesting videos, please subscribe.